Dr. Mike Fullingim was preparing to serve the Lord as a gospel worker overseas. Early on in that process, he made a decision that following the Lord was worth any risk that his calling might bring.
Just being prepared and knowing that the Lord is with you, whether you survive the process or not, but you got to be willing to put it on the line. So it's really basically training for martyrdom. It's like, Lord, if you want my life, you've got my life. Well, they can't kill me twice. I've already given my life to you,
Jesus never promised his followers an easy path. In fact, he told his disciples that the world would hate them. He sent them out as sheep among wolves. Jesus' words came true in the life of the apostles, and they're still coming true today in the lives of his followers around the world. Join host Todd Nettleton as we hear their inspiring stories and learn how we can help. Right now on the Voice of the Martyrs Radio Network.
Welcome again to the Voice of the Martyrs Radio. My name is Todd Nettleton. I am very excited about our conversation this week. I want to introduce you to one of my friends, one of my former professors. Dr. Mike Fullingim is a longtime professor at Oklahoma Wesleyan University, including teaching in the persecuted church ministry program there. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about his missions career before he was a professor. If you go back to 1982, our family, I was 12 years old, my family moved to Papua New Guinea. Dr. Mike and his wife Barbara were also in Papua New Guinea about that same 4-year period. Our terms overlapped. In fact, at the Missionary Children's Hostel where I lived, my parents were the parents there at the hostel. Dr. Mike's son, Jeremy, was my roommate that first year there. He was 7, I was 12. Mostly we got along pretty well, I think. So, Dr. Mike Fullingim, welcome to the Voice of the Martyrs Radio.
Thank you very much. I have great memories of when you and your family arrived in the highlands of Papua New Guinea. It's been a few years ago.
It's been a long time ago, yeah. A little bit has happened since then.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the very beginning because we have people listening to this who are serving right now in gospel service overseas. We have some who are thinking about serving, maybe even in the preparation process. And I think we have some who God wants to go serve. Maybe they haven't heard that call or they haven't said yes to that call yet. Let's talk about that call in your life. And how did you hear that call? How did you make that decision? Okay, I'm going to pack up and leave America. And the Bible talks about the ends of the earth. You've been there. Alia is pretty close to the ends of the earth. How did God call you out of America to go there?
I have reflected on that a long time. And it was not an overnight decision. It was a 12-year process from my conscious memory of responding to a message that I heard from a missionary from West Africa who had come to my church. I was in the 9th grade. Paul Decker, who had been a missionary in Sierra Leone, West Africa, was speaking at my home church, and he used Jeremiah 5:19 as a text. Now, at 9th grade, I wasn't questioning his exegesis. But the verse ends up in saying, "You will serve strangers in a land that's not your own," and he used that as a challenge to the church and to young people to serve strangers in a land that was not your own. And I have to admit, Todd, God grabbed my heart at 9th grade, and that's when I made a conscious decision. Whatever I do, I need to do well to serve God in a land that's not my own, okay? Wow. That was 9th grade. Well, 4 years later, I find myself at a precursor of Oklahoma Wesleyan University, Millville Wesleyan College. 4 years later, that same missionary was on furlough again, and he got the circuit where he came to the school and spoke. And I responded as a freshman in college, yes, Lord, that's exactly what I'm doing. I will be doing just that. And that's 1967 when that was. And a few years later, I find myself in Papua New Guinea and serving the Lord. And, of course, there's a lot of preparation prior to that from college to grad school and on. But the next part of my not knowing my call came when I came home on furlough and was speaking in various churches. One church that I was speaking in was in Iowa, and the pastor's wife had been my YMWB, Young Missionary Workers Band, children's program at my home church. She had been there as a young lady, And she introduced me that night. She said there was this young boy in the church, and he was over top of those pews and underneath those around. You might call him an overactive boy. And when I would share the missionary story, he came right to that front pew and sat and listened very carefully.
Wow.
That's our speaker tonight. It's like, okay, I'm a little embarrassed to stand up being a hyperactive, overactive kid, but it stuck in my heart. Something
was there.
Something must have grabbed my heart
Yep.
as a young boy, that I'm listening. Well, on that same furlough, I was speaking at another church in Indiana this time, and one of the staff members of Global Partners, it was called Wesleyan World Missions then, one of the staff members introduced me that night as a speaker. And I guess I should get used to how people are going to introduce me, but anyway, he talked about a woman, a mother in Oklahoma who sent money to Global Partners or Wesleyan World Missions and said, all that she said was, my son is going to be a missionary. Month after month, year after year. He said, finally I wrote back to this lady back in Oklahoma and said, ma'am, we don't know your son. We've never heard this name before. He hasn't applied or anything like that. What are we going to do with this money if he doesn't become a missionary? He said, this woman wrote back a very short note and said, what I've given to God, I've given. Then he turned to me and he said, that's our speaker tonight. That's the first time I'd ever heard that about my mother.
Wow. We're talking this week on Voice of the Martyrs Radio with Dr. Mike Fullingim. He is a longtime professor training future missionaries at Oklahoma Wesleyan University. Dr. Mike, how did you then go from sort of what I will say general missionary service to really narrowing in on linguistics and translation and studying the language? And was that kind of a natural bent of yours anyway, or did something happen that kind of focused you in that direction?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, ninth grade, as I said, that's when I started my emotional, mental, and spiritual preparation. I read every book that I could from the series, Jungle Doctor book series. I had envisioned myself being a medical doctor, making a difference in the lives for the people. But it's interesting that while I was in high school, I took Latin. Well, little did I know the Latin would be like a precursor to a linguistic study because you're learning a dead language, but you're learning to analyze grammar and context and all that kind of stuff. And so when I went on to college, there was no such thing as mission classes. You know, you just studied to be a pastor or something. But when I transferred to Southern Nazarene University, there was a Nazarene missionary that had left the field from Korea, and he was taking courses in cultural anthropology at the University of Oklahoma. In fact, he was working on his doctorate. And man, did he turn me on to the social sciences about learning cognitively about other cultures. And then one day he makes the comment in class. He said, I've run across a group of people down here at the University of Oklahoma that call themselves the Summer Institute of Linguistics, which is the academic branch of Wycliffe Bible Translators.
Yeah.
And so he made the comment in class, in one of our mission classes, that if you guys are really serious about missions, you're going to need some linguistics. So I found a way when I was pastoring a church in Oklahoma City, before ever going to New Guinea, would you let me go to summer school at the University of Oklahoma? I'm really trying to prepare for going to the mission field. I said, yeah, as long as you don't drop in any of your preaching. Well, I started taking linguistics. And I was not a bad student in school, but linguistics ate my lunch. Okay. It was so esoteric, jargon, lots of language that you can look up in a dictionary, and that word's not even in the dictionary because it's something specialized about language. And I was confused for about 6 weeks into that 10-week program. And that was putting doubt in me that I could ever be a missionary if I can't understand linguistics. And I just prayed one night, Lord, you've got to help me. I've never had difficulty in school. And that following Monday when I went to classes, and this was going to be my last week, I was quitting. I didn't want to be a failure, so I was going to quit. And the light bulb just came on in class. When the teacher said something, I raised my hand and I answered the question. And he said, you got it. How'd you know that? Well, I had been reading so many books on the side trying to figure out where this linguistics was going. And then all of a sudden, it was like bread on butter. This is the crowning edge of my training. Without language learning, you don't last long in the field.
And I think of us as we pray for gospel workers
Yes.
right now.
Yes.
That's one of the things we can pray. Lord, turn on the language for
Turn on
them.
the language thing, because if they get through 4 years without being somewhat fluent, I'm going to say it's got to be at least a level 3 out of level 5. Level 5 would be fluent, native speaker, make jokes. That's your highest level of language learning, when you can make jokes. But if you get to a level 3, if you don't get to there, most likely you won't return, because it's embarrassing. How long you been here? And you know what's being referred to. Your lousy accent, and we can't hear our own accent.
Right.
We can't hear it, So that's an important prayer that many of our missionaries as adults feel very greatly, or they'll find a way to be comfortable using an interpreter. I won't use the word interrupter again, but you won't be able to speak to a hard issue if you have to have somebody else. Hey, would you help me translate here? And you're just wanting it to be one-on-one with another person, and you bring in a third person. It's really challenging to do that. Yeah.
Fluency is more than just being able to find a bathroom and buy your groceries. Coming to the point of having a spiritual heart conversation. What are your deepest needs? What are your deepest concerns? How can I pray for you? That's a lot more than, hey, where's your bathroom?
I know.
And so getting people to that point, and it doesn't happen in 6 months.
No, it does not. It does not.
And so I think
it's a lifelong process, actually.
Let's talk about the adjustment for you coming home, because you came home to finish up your doctorate in linguistics.
Yes.
With the complete understanding that you were, just as soon as that was done, you were back on a plane, back to Papua New Guinea. That didn't happen that way. Talk about that transition, and talk about how hard it was for you, because I think part of your heart is still in Papua New Guinea.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow, where do you start with that saga? Between my 2 furloughs, so I served in Papua New Guinea for 8 years over an 11-year period. So from 75 to 79 was my first term. 79, 80, and 81, 82 was spent in grad school. I finished all of my coursework before going. And then I felt like I was home so long that I needed to get back to New Guinea. So we went back in 1982 through 86. But my professors at the University of Texas at Arlington felt like I would never come back and finish. I would just probably be an all but, ABD, all but dissertation. Finished it all, but you couldn't finish it really. But that was heavy over me as I went back to Papua New Guinea, and so I was bound and determined to finish my degree when I got back, which I did in 1987. I finished. And then when the word got around to some of our Christian universities that I had finished a PhD in linguistics and anthropology, and all of a sudden I started getting all kinds of calls about, hey, would you come and interview for a job? We were waiting during that semester because transitions are really difficult on missionary kids.
They are.
And I did not want to come back. If I had left to go to New Guinea the moment I finished the dissertation, we would have come back in 4 years when Jeremy was a senior, and he would have graduated people he didn't even know anything about. It was hard on my oldest, always changing and finding new friends. So I waited a year, intentionally, like took an extra gap year. And that's when all these calls came in. It's like, I am not applying for any position. What is going on here? Because, number one, all of these colleges were Christian universities. I'm doing God's call.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to New Guinea is part of God's work. Well, which one of these God's works do I do? It was the most confusing time of my life. Well, I took a one-year job at Oklahoma Wesleyan University. I said, okay, I'll help out. I'll help out a year. And during that year, it's like I read one of Dwight L. Moody's statements about it's better to train 10 people than to do the work of 10 people. Well, that didn't help me out too much, but I was still wanting to head back to New Guinea. By waiting that year, then we could have gone back over, and then my son would have graduated there, and we would have been a proper transitional year. But the Lord had us stay the next year. And the next year. And I still left my possessions in Papua New Guinea. I kept them there for 5 years thinking, Lord, because now you have a daughter that's coming up. What's the best timing for the school for those kids? So you get sandwiched between your family needs and between God, what are you wanting? I need to be back in New Guinea. The things that I remember doing my dissertation, I need to put into action. But after 5 years, it was finally sending those things home with a tear in my eye. I could hardly speak about New Guinea without crying, because it was so important for me to be a part of that, what it had done to my life, etc. But the Lord gave me the opportunity to start training other people. And, it's God's work. Mm-hmm. It's all God's work. And it took me a while to get through the transition, though.
Did you feel at that point like somehow you were betraying your call? Or
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's like, whoa. That's still hard to talk about, because I trained hard and long for living and working in Papua New Guinea. And a lot of the young people that I worked with I get Facebook messages, so-and-so has died in the village, and it's like, oh, I could have been there. I would have been there, but I wasn't there. Yeah, I felt like that's on my human side. My human side would have said, yeah, you wimped out, or no, it wasn't that at all. It was almost like I didn't give up. It was like God was steering the ship in a different direction, and little did I know that I would be training missionaries for All Points Bulletin, over 200 plus probably, gone through a program that I developed, and okay, Lord. But even a few years ago when I finished with that, I said, okay, I finished. Now get me back.
So it's better to train 10 people than to do the work of 10 people.
Yes.
But you've trained 200 people.
Oh, yeah.
Who are out now, like
Many,
you say, I think every continent, probably.
Yes, right.
Serving the Lord, learning languages.
That's why they're still there, because they've learned languages.
Yeah. We're talking this week on Voice of the Martyrs Radio with Dr. Mike Fullingim. He is a longtime professor at Oklahoma Wesleyan University, training gospel workers to go out all over the world. Mike, one of the things that obviously gospel workers are thinking about now, and some of those within the program at Oklahoma Wesleyan, others are going to dangerous places, going to hard places. Someone has said, all the easy places are reached. We've already sent missionaries there.
That's why they're reached.
The places that are left are going to be hard. How do you, in class and in conversation and in fellowship with these future missionaries, how do you prepare them for that? Like it's going to be hard. It's going to be dangerous. There's going to be days where, you're risking your life. You're risking your family. How do you kind of help them think about that or pray about that or consider that possibility?
Well, we have there's several classes where you deal with, the whole notion of persecution. It is every Christian's lot to suffer. Mm-hmm. Anytime you're traveling, it wasn't that you potentially could be victimized. I know several missionaries that were killed in New Guinea, some by mistake, others quite intentionally. So it's just being prepared and knowing that the Lord is with you, whether you survive the process or not, but you got to be willing to put it on the line. So it's really basically training for martyrdom. It's like, Lord, if you want my life, you've got my life. Well,
right.
I can't kill me twice. I've already given my life to you, I remember traveling for VOM once to go to Pakistan, and this is just about a few months after an American drone missile went astray and hit a house of civilians, got the wrong house, and death to Americans signs everywhere in Pakistan. And I remember my wife turning to me in the house and saying, "Are you still planning on going to Pakistan?" I said, "Sweetheart, I died to Christ once, so they can't kill me twice. It's like that. Yeah, sure, I'm going." And you travel with your eyes wide open, but your life is in the Lord's hands one way or the other. But you got to work it out. So we do have students writing out their theology of suffering. How do they deal with it? What verses are you going to hold on to? And how to debrief things when you've been traumatized, and et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of mental health issues that you have to work through as well too. And the Lord is there. And many missionary organizations have personnel that help people through trauma and get them through those things as well.
As we finish up, Dr. Mike, we always want to equip listeners to pray.
Yes.
You have talked about the fact that there's a lot of one-term missionaries They go for one term and they come home for furlough and they never go back. How do we pray? How can you help us to pray for those serving in their first term right now? They're running headlong into culture shock, and they're in the depths of trying to learn language and feeling like a failure. And maybe their kids are having a hard time adjusting to the school and a new language and a new everything. You were there. It's been a while ago, but you were there. You were that young family making an adjustment to Papua New Guinea. How do we pray for those first-term missionaries?
Number one, we can be praying for people on every adjustment that they're going to be making. It could be language, it could be with their kids, it could be routines, it could be driving on the other side of the road like it was in New Guinea. Everything you do is stressful, okay? So there's the personal life of the missionary and the family, the relationship between husband and wife. It's like a pressure cooker. And then if they're part of a team, you pray for those team conflicts as well. And then, of course, there's the third context of praying. Lord, as they develop relationships with nationals, help the people that they're there to help these missionaries to drink coffee in the right place, find the right person to talk to, help those divine appointments. Wherever your routine is taking you, help them to have meaningful interactions and develop friendships. And it's not always easy for people in local cultures. How many foreigners are our friends here in this culture? Are you ready to go up to somebody that doesn't quite speak your language really well and say, hey, do you need some help? Or, well, that's the point. You're expecting a stranger in their country, a foreigner, come up and develop a relationship with you, a foreigner, can't even speak their language properly? Well, pray for those divine appointments that somebody would be intrigued by, hey, I see you need help. What can I do for you, And so I think in those three areas of personal life, inner mission, and the people themselves. So,
yeah. You've talked about in your own life the sense of calling that you had. I think that's one I would add to your list is just pray for them to have that strong sense of calling.
And not abandon that calling.
This is what God has called me to do.
That's right.
Yes, it's hard. Yes, today was terrible, but this is what God called me to do.
That's right.
Let's talk now about praying for they're past that first term. Maybe they've been there 20 years. Maybe they speak the language like a champion.
That's great.
How do we keep praying for them after they're over some of those kind of initial hurdles, and now it's kind of regular life?
I think one of the greatest things is the changing role of a missionary. I think when maybe if they're on the field 20 and 30 years, that puts them back in the 90s when they went to the field, and maybe they were into church planting and developing that. But now you've got a whole team around you of nationals. So making that transition, you don't have to be front and center for everything that goes on. Enable people, be a facilitator, be a coordinator, rather than having to be front and center. You don't need to serve on every committee, and get your opinion known. It's like you listen to local leadership, maybe learn from them as well, and there's never an end to stopping learning language. So that one should be kept going right through to the very end. That's why I'm sad, because I've lost part of my New Guinea language because I've not had anybody to talk to. But for missionaries, they should keep right on going. But that changing role is very significant. I had a very dominant role in New Guinea, but as a quote-unquote district missionary, and it's like, what would that be like to step out of that role, and what would that look like? You don't need me here, but I'm here to support what you're doing, and making that role shift properly,
Dr. Mike Fullingim has been our guest this week on Voice of the Martyrs Radio. Dr. Mike, I'm very grateful for you. I'm grateful for your impact on my life personally, but also your willingness to come in and share your experiences. And thanks for being our guest this week on Voice of the Martyrs Radio.
Thank you for having me. It's tremendously humbling. I've been known this organization for a long time, and thank you for allowing me this opportunity.
Well, it is our pleasure. If you are just joining us, you can listen to this episode as well as all of our episodes at vomradio.net. You can also find Voice of the Martyrs Radio wherever you listen to podcasts. And I hope you'll be back with us next week. We are going to visit with a Christian from Central Asia. We will talk about his story. We will talk about the suffering that he has endured. All of that next week right here on the Voice of the Martyrs radio network.